Hey guys, it's Tuesday, March 30th, and today we are taking notes on pages 7 and 8 in your packet. So turn to page 7 and let's get started. Now, you might want to go ahead and pause the video and write down all of these definitions and then pick the video back up once you've done so, because I'm just going to talk through these definitions very quickly. So a circle is a set of points equidistant from a given point called the center. So equidistant is exactly what it sounds like, equal distance. Now the parts of the circle that we're going to talk about, the center, the radius, the diameter, and the circumference. The center is the given point from which all points are equidistant, and it is the middle of the circle. So if we look at this circle right here, the center is right there at point P. It's in the middle of the circle, and all the points along the circle are the same distance from that point. Okay? Now, the distance from the center to any point on the circle is called the radius. So for example, this line segment that goes from point A to point P is the radius. A lot of times the radius is abbreviated with the letter R. The diameter is the distance across the circle through the center. So it goes all the way across. And it is twice the radius. It's always 2 times the radius. So if I look at this line segment AB or BA, that is a diameter for this circle here. It goes all the way across and it goes through the center. Now the circumference is the distance around the circle. So think of the circumference as the same thing as perimeter for a square, but it's the perimeter of the circle. It's the distance all the way around the circle. Okay, so now that we've talked about that, let's talk about some formulas that you're going to need for area and circumference. So the formula for area of a circle is pi times the radius squared. The area of a circle is pi r squared. Now, there are 2 formulas that I'm going to give you for circumference of a circle, and you can use whichever one you feel most comfortable using. So try both of them out, figure out which one you're comfortable with. So circumference could be 2 times pi times the radius, or 2 pi r, or because 2 times the radius is always the diameter, you could just say that the circumference is pi times the diameter. Now, all of these formulas have this symbol pi in them. So I want you to remember that pi is approximately 3.14. And instead of using 3.14, we're actually just going to use the pi button in our calculator. So let's look at these examples. It says find the area of each circle, round to the nearest tenth. So we're rounding to 1 decimal place. So in number 1, we're given a radius of 3 meters. So I know that that's an R, it's a radius. It doesn't go all the way across the circle. Okay, so again, our formula for area is pi times the radius squared. So we're using the pi button in our calculator, but we're going to plug in 3 for our radius and we're going to square that. Well, we know that 3 squared is 9. So I could just say pi times 9 and put that in my calculator, but I could also put it in my calculator just like that right there. However you want to do it is fine. But I'm going to go to my calculator right here. So we have pi times 9, and I get 28.27, but I'm rounding to 1 decimal place. So because there's a 7 in that hundredth spot, I'm going to round up. So 28.3 meters squared. So don't forget to square your unit. We're still doing that. Okay, let's look at number 2. So again, we're given a radius of 10.8. And we know our formula, area is pi times r squared. So we're going to use the pi button in our calculator, but I'm going to have to square 10.8. Oops. Let's square it. There we go. So I'm going to put it into my calculator just like that. So we've got pi times 10.8 squared. And it tells me it's 366.43. Now, because that hundredths place is a 3, I'm not going to round it at all. So 366.4. And we can't forget our units. It's feet squared. Okay, moving on to number 3. So number 3 is different because we're actually given a diameter instead of a radius. But for area of a circle, we always need the radius. So how do I figure out what the radius is? Well, it's just half of 14. So I know this distance right there would be 7 yards. So area then is pi times 7 squared. We know that 7 squared is 49, and I could go ahead and simplify that, but I don't need to. We can just type it into our calculator as pi times 7 squared, and it tells us it's 153.93. That 3 tells me I don't need to round at all, so 153.9. And let's not forget our units, it's yards squared. Okay, number 4. Again, I'm given a diameter, but I need a radius. So I need to figure out what is just half of this diameter. Well, 31 divided by 2 is going to be 15.5. So 15.5 kilometers would be my radius. So we're going to use that in our formula. Pi times 15.5 squared. And I'm going to put that into my calculator just like that. So pi times 15.5 squared is 754.76. So because I've got that 6 there, I'm actually going to round up. So 754.8. So the area is 754.8 kilometers squared. Okay, now numbers 5 and 6, we just have half of a circle. And remember, half of a circle is called a semicircle. So we're going to find the area as we normally would, but we're actually going to divide it by 2. So in number 5, we're told that the radius is 16 centimeters. So normally, we would say that the area of the circle is pi times the radius 16 squared. But I'm actually going to divide all of that by 2. Okay? So I'm going to put this into my calculator. So we've got, oops, here we are. We've got, I'm going to put it all in parentheses, pi times, oops, let's just, I don't know what I'm doing here, y'all. There we go, backspace. Okay, so we've got pi times 16 squared. And now I'm going to put all of that, oops, let's see if I can fix that. There we go. Now I'm going to put all of that over 2. So I get 402.12. That 2 tells me I don't need to round, so I'm going to leave it as 402.1. centimeters squared. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing in number 6, but notice in number 6, I'm given a diameter. The measurement I'm given goes all the way across that semicircle, but I'm really just interested in that half right there. So what is half of 22.6? Well, half of 22.6 would be 11.3 inches. So I'm going to use that. So area of my semicircle, normally I would say pi times 11.3 squared, but I'm going to have to divide whatever I get by 2. Okay? So let's go back to our calculator and put this in. So we've got pi times 11.3 squared. Close that parentheses, close that parentheses. Now divide everything by 2. And I get 200.57. That 7 tells me I need to round up, so 200.6. Oops. So area is 200.6, and it should be inches squared. Okay, moving on to page 8. So now we're told to find the circumference of each circle. And again, to round to the nearest tenth. So we're just rounding to 1 decimal place. Now, one thing that I'm going to do, since we wrote the circumference formulas over here, I'm going to use a little bit of teacher magic. Took a minute. And I'm going to copy that. I'm going to paste it over here where we can easily see the circumference formulas. It doesn't matter which one you use, so use whichever one you're more comfortable with, or use the one based on what you're given. So for example, in number 7, I'm given a radius. So I know that this right here is a radius. So I would use the C equals 2 times pi times r formula because I'm given a radius. So based on this, I would just plug in 17 for r. So C equals 2 times pi times 17. And I would put that into my calculator. So we've got 2 times pi times 17, and we get 106.81. Well, that 1 tells me I don't need to round up, so I'm going to leave it as 106.8. And don't forget your units. Our unit is millimeters. Now, this is not an area, so our unit does not need to be squared. Remember, circumference kind of corresponds to the perimeter, but it's of a circle. Okay, so it's the distance all the way around. Okay, let's look at number 8. Again, I'm given a radius. It doesn't go all the way across the circle, so this is a radius. So this is an example where I would use the formula C equals 2 times pi times r. So let's plug some things in. C equals 2 times pi times 3.9 for r. And I'm just going to put that into my calculator. So 2 times pi times 3.9, and we get 24.50. That 0 tells me I don't need to round up, so I'm going to leave it as 24.5. Now 24.5, what? Don't forget to include your meters. Your unit always has to be included. Now 9 and 10 are different because we're given the diameter. So this is a case where I might use the second formula, C equals pi times the diameter. So C equals pi times the diameter. So C equals pi times 19 in this case. So I'm going to go put that into my calculator. So pi times 19 is 56.69. That 9 tells me I need to round up. So, sorry, I think I said that wrong. It's 59.69. And that 9, that second 9 tells me I need to round up. So 59.7. .7 centimeters. Okay, and number 10, again, we're given the diameter. So this is a good chance to use the C equals pi times D formula. So C equals pi times the diameter is 8.4. And I'm going to go put that into my calculator. So pi times 8.4, and I get 26.38. That 8 tells me I need to round up, so 26.4 is our circumference. And it's 26.4 inches. Okay, so now let's talk applications, word problems. Okay, so find the radius of a circle if its area is 706.9 square millimeters. Okay, so first of all, we need to remember the area of a circle. So area is pi times the radius squared. It's kind of a funky two, sorry. Pi r squared. That is the area of a circle. Okay, and we're told what the area is. It's 706.9. So I'm going to plug that in for A. And I'm not going to plug anything in for pi, but I need to figure out the radius of the circle. So I'm just going to leave r squared like that. Now, the first thing that I can do is get that r squared by itself. So I'm actually, let's change my color here. To get r squared by itself, I need to unconnect it or disconnect it from that pi, and it's connected to pi through multiplication. So we undo that by dividing by pi on both sides. So our pi's cancel out and r squared is by itself. So let's go to our calculator and figure out what 706.9 divided by pi is. So 706.9 divided by pi. And notice I get 225.01. Well, that 1 tells me not to round at all, so I'd have just 225.0. So I'm just going to leave it as 225. So r squared is 225. Now I need to take the square root. So I'm taking the square root of both sides. And that's going to get the r by itself. And you might know this off the top of your head, but in case you don't, and in case you need a refresher, you can use your calculator. The square root symbol is that. So I'm putting 225 inside the square root, and I get 15. So 15 what? I need the unit. So let's look back up here. Notice it's square millimeters, so it would just be millimeters. So 15 millimeters is the radius. Okay, number 12. If the area of a circle is 28.27 square inches, find the length of its diameter. Okay, so again, we're going to use the area of a circle formula. Area is pi r squared. Okay, what we're first going to have to do is figure out what the radius is, and then we'll double it to find the diameter. Okay, so we're told that the area of the circle is 28.27. So I plug that in for A. So 28.27 equals pi times r squared. Now, to solve this for r, we first need to divide by pi on both sides. So I'm going to go to my calculator and divide 28.27 by pi. So 28.27 divided by pi gives me 8.99. Now, I'm going to actually round that up to 9. So 9 is r squared. Now, when I take the square root, I know that the square root of 9 is 3. So 3 is my r. Well, 3 what? 3 inches. Now, remember your diameter is 2 times your radius. So 3 times 2 is simply 6. So the diameter is 6 inches. And that's our answer. Okay, let's look at number 13. If the circumference of a circle is 41.8 feet, find the diameter of the circle. Okay, remember our formula. So C equals pi times D. That's the one that I'm going to use because it's telling me to find the diameter. So that's the one that would make most sense to use. Okay, it also tells me that the circumference is 41.8 feet. So I plug that in for C. So 41.8 equals pi times the value that I'm trying to find, D. So we're just going to solve for D. D is connected to pi through multiplication, so I undo that by dividing. So I divide by pi on both sides. And that'll get D by itself. So let's go to our calculator. We've got 41.8 divided by pi, and we get 13.30. Now that 0 tells me not to round up, so 13.3 is our diameter. And 13.3 what? Well, it's feet. So 13.3 feet. Okay, moving on to number 14. The circumference of a circle is 50.24 centimeters. Find its radius. So this time, because we're trying to find the radius, it makes more sense to use our second formula, C equals 2 times pi times r. Okay, now we're told that the circumference is 50.24, so I'm going to plug that in for C. So 50.24 equals 2 times pi times r. Okay, now I'm gonna try to get r by itself. And r is connected to two things. It's connected to 2 and pi, both through multiplication. So I can undo that by dividing 2 pi on both sides. So our 2 pi's will cancel out, r will be by itself, but let's go to our calculator and figure out what this is. So we have 50.24 divided by 2 pi, and I get 7.99. Now that second 9 tells me I need to round up, so I would actually have 8.0. So I'm just going to say that that is 8 centimeters equals r. Okay, number 15. If the tire on a bike has a radius of 12 inches, how far will the bike travel in 100 rotations? Okay, so we would need to find the circumference of the bike wheel, okay, or bike tire. So we know that it looks something like this, okay? And we know that the radius is 12. So remember, the radius only goes part way. That's maybe a little too far, something like that. And we know that that is 12. Oops. Right? So to find the circumference, because we're given the radius, I think it's best that we use this formula here. C equals 2 times pi times r. So I'm going to plug in 12 for r. So C equals 2 times pi times 12. And I'm going to go put that in my calculator. So 2 times pi times 12, I get 75.39. Now I'm going to go ahead and round that to one decimal place, so 75.4. So the circumference is 75.4, and we need our unit, it's inches. Okay, now how far does the bike travel in 100 rotations? So I'm just going to multiply that times 100. So 75.4 times 100 is going to be 7,540 inches. Okay. Now Lisa has a circular garden with a diameter of 17.5 feet. If she uses 3 teaspoons of fertilizer for every 30 square feet of garden, how much fertilizer will she need to cover the garden? Okay, so to cover the garden, that's like the amount of space the garden takes up. So we're going to be talking about area here. But let's draw the garden first. So we know it's circular, so it looks kind of like that right there. And we know it's got a diameter of 17.5 feet. So the diameter goes all the way across. And we know it is 17.5 feet. Okay? Now, let's first find the area. And in order to do that, I don't need the diameter. I just need the radius, right? And the radius is just half of that diameter. So what is half of 17.5? Well, half of 17.5 is going to be 8.75. Okay? So that right there is my radius. So remember our formula for area of a circle. Area is pi times the radius squared. So area is pi times 8.75 squared. Well, let's go put that in our calculator and figure out what the area is. So pi times 8.75 squared, we get 240.52. So 240.5 feet is our area. Okay, so we found the area of our garden, 240.5 feet squared. Now, if she uses 3 teaspoons of fertilizer for every 30 square feet of garden, how much fertilizer will she need to cover the garden? Okay, so I'm going to set up a ratio here, and I'm going to use this information. 3 teaspoons for every 30 square feet. Okay, so 3 teaspoons for every 30 square feet equals how many teaspoons in 240.5 square feet. And now I'm just going to cross multiply. So we know that 30 times x is 30x. And we're going to set that equal to 3 times 240.5. So we know that 3 times 240.5 is 721.5. Now I'm just going to divide that by 30 on both sides to get that x by itself. So let's just divide that by 30. and I get 24.05 or 24.1. But here's my question. Can she use 0.5 of a teaspoon? No, so let's just go ahead and round all the way up. She would be using 25 teaspoons. Of fertilizer. Okay, so that is the end of our notes for today. For homework, you are working on homework number 2. I will see y'all tomorrow. Have